real networks, streaming, Windows Media Audio, MP3, and then also the fight with Xbox and PlayStation for Blu-ray and HD DVD. Toshiba came in and I worked with them for those. So we sold the player, and the player basically became the Microsoft portable player. And it was, it was a lot of credibility to sell a product, to have that experience to sell a product. As soon as we sold it, then the question was, there wasn't enough markets to sell an MP3 player, a media player for them. And also, even though, so now you would have bundled with the Cassiopeia a Windows Media Player, but they chose not to ship MP3 with it. And it was because Napster had come out and the whole music industry was like fucking pissed that music was being stolen. And the thing with Windows Media Audio is that they had built-in digital rights management with it from the get-go. And so so that was a good experience in terms of like being inside of how Microsoft views like how they help other businesses and how they do this. So from interactive objects perspective, do we do an MP3 player? Like I said, there wasn't enough market to make its own player. And mind you, there's only 3 engineers, me, Matt, and Ed. And even to ship that player, we had to come into Microsoft. So when the Microsoft Windows Media Division bought the product, they came in and they just threw a bunch of, they have directors, they have program managers, they have testers. Like this was not, we had not worked on commercial shipping product at 22. Well, no one had, right? No one had shipped a player, but so because we sold the player to Microsoft, we had an agreement with them to kind of continue working with them, and it basically turned into a clusterfuck because Microsoft internally, Windows CE didn't know if they want to own it. The Windows Media Division didn't know if they wanted to own it. So we're just a small company that has this contract to continue helping, and then I'm just getting lost in, and nobody does anything that's risky if it's not a known product, if it's not blessed by whatever. And so we had to decide like, okay, what are we gonna do now? And the decision I made was that Windows CE is a $600 device at the end of the day, and memory and compact flash is $80. We need to go deeper. We need to go lower. We need to build a real-time operating system that's dedicated to only. We need to make a Walkman OS so that the consumer electronics companies can quickly pick and choose how they want to build a digital audio device. And basically, all I did was just a simple graph of the cost of memory. So I just had a chart of like, here's the history of flash, here's the cost of CD, here's the cost of hard drives, and here's how many songs, and here's the kind of like pools of songs, 1,000, 10,000, and what are the technologies needed in order to have these, and here's the timelines in which each of these storage formats are going to have, that people are going to give a shit about them before flash memory just kind of takes over everything.
Right.
It was really just that simple. It was just kind of like, okay, just plotting out storage. Mm-hmm. And here's how big a song is, and here's the cost for it, because that's the driving factor. And then from there, what are the bill of materials for a device that plays digital audio? Straight up, like bill of materials. What's it cost to build it? How cheap can you do it? And how easily and turnkey can you make the software? So that's where you need to, you have to write your Gillette file systems, ISO 9660, FAT32, FAT16. FAT16 because it's sometimes cheaper to run code out of flash memory that's on a 16-bit bus as opposed to a 32-bit bus. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then even if you have to do double fetches, all you have to do is load it to memory. That you're going to have SRAM. SRAM has its own cost function, whether it's internal SRAM or external SRAM in terms of buffering. So all these kind of mechanics of like how do you design and architect the system, and then from there patent these things that are important. So that's where the buffering patent comes from. That's where the playlist patent comes from, and these are issued, right? So like, what are the key components in terms of like managing and then when I came back to Microsoft, I was like, you guys need to make a dedicated player because Windows CE always has to have this display. The whole like subsuming a function, fine. You're always this high-end thing, but there's this area for some duration of time that's going to be digital media, and people are going to learn like how do you manage it on your desktop, how do you transfer it to your device, and then how do you manage this library and how do you navigate this library? Like that's going to be in. And at some point in the future, we're going to pay a subscription for it. But today, we're not. Like there's this, and so like, obviously, like my job came from like being a programmer to trying to like educate people on like, what's this vision? Why is this vision? What's the path through this vision? And also not having infinite amounts of money. Like I'm from a startup, and a startup needs to like focus on building something and selling it and moving on with life. And also being a publicly traded company is a whole different thing. So we did that. So I had a friend who worked at Cirrus Logic. He was I went to military school. He went to military school with me, and he was like, oh, you need to talk to these. Cirrus Logic is like the main, digital, DAC chip builders. You need to talk to them. They have this new chip. It's an ARM chip. And also another thing, no one knows what ARM is. Right. No. And ARM at this time has 32K SRAM running at, I think, 24 hertz. Like that's just, it's just,
yeah.
Shit. I mean, all it can do is, the fact that we got it to do as many things as we did was like, and also the only people who had an MP3 decoder, I think for the entire time that we were in this, was ARM itself. Like ARM engineers had to build the decoder themselves and then like do license agreements for people who buy the chip cells. Or and then they bundle it, and then they have to pay the license fee, and then us. And so if you wanted to do a player, you had to just negotiate. And so the idea was all the stack, we just pay off. We do all the licenses. So because we were usually hired to do all the optimizations, Audible, Windows Media Audio, ASELP for voice recording. MP3, ID3, V2, V1, all those things. We had already done all those things, built it, and then we paid the licenses for it. We've already signed bulk license agreements for all those things. And then we had our own UI, and we had network, so we had network streaming, and we also worked on the UPnP protocol, so like streaming between devices in the home, and then there were a bunch of shitty like Chinese companies that wanted to build something as cheap as possible, but they didn't have any infrastructure to like, build something that was quality. Iomega. So at that same time, IBM Research contacted me, and they gave me, the microdrive, and obviously we optimized for that. And it's really based off of people being kind to us as a startup, recognizing what we were doing, and giving us either access to resource. Money didn't fall from the sky. Cirrus Logic gave us money. They gave us $1 million because they were making a chip, and they wanted to be able to go to these people, and you pay them $2. You pay us, if you paid us $50,000 to $100,000 plus $1 to $2 per device, we'd ship a device. So then the trick is to kind of work with someone who had the best chance of getting a very good device out there. And so we built a bunch of devices, a bunch of shapes, and Iomega, I had contacted them a couple of times, and I sought them out because they had, at the same time, they had the click drive, which was doing nothing. Yeah. So it was like, hey, and they're Mormon. They were not they're on the downcline of their heyday. They were trying to be rebuilt, and I just said like, this makes exact sense for this, right? Like, we'll do it if you want to sell it. Here's a player, and they were like, okay, do it. And then they paid us our fee. We worked on it. They put in those guys.